Why are you the way that you are? I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. As requested, today we'll be exploring the MEG 2, The Trench. While not a great adaptation, with many of the marine conservation themes and major characters either changed or simply not present, and the main conflict and deep character drama gutted, the first film was a surprise hit that lived on its promise of Jaws on steroids. It was a pure creature feature, well aware of how silly it was, with Statham wrestling gargantuan prehistoric sharks, trying to protect his crew from the creatures he'd spent his life researching. Where director Jon Turteltaub excelled was in capturing the enormity of the Megalodon and the undersea environment. There was a tangible sense of scale and dread that underscored every scene, effectively making the ocean itself as much a character in the film as the humans and the MEG that was after them. The film certainly had its flaws. Many of the characters were underdeveloped and served little purpose beyond fodder for the Megalodon. The scientific logic was often hand-waved, and the third act was over the top. But it was well-paced, and the script made an effort to make you care about Jonas, Mac, Su-Yin, and her daughter Mei-Ying, while the core team, for the most part, make reasonable choices given the information they're given. There's genuine tension both in the water and on the base, with character histories and objectives colliding, while resentment, fear, and denial floated to the surface.
One man, Jonas Taylor.
And look what happened to that one man the last time he went to these
He
deaths.
saved 11 people, including you, Heller. That's what happened.
Left our friends to die.
He's in perfect shape.
Just like the last time you examined me.
So, going into the sequel, helmed by Ben Wheatley, who, unlike Turteltaub, specialized in grounded drama and terror, I was hoping to see much of the same, archetypal characters making reasonable decisions to deal with the terrifying reality of a MEG appearing in the ocean. Starring Jason Statham, Cliff Curtis, Wu Jing, Paige Kennedy, and Shuya Sophie Kai, the MEG 2 picks back up with the adventures of Jonas Taylor and the Manor One research team. But how does it fare compared to the original?
Allow me to break the ice.
After a 5-year wait, we have a MEG movie where the MEGs are practically extras. For some reason, our paleobiologist turned oceanic action hero, Jonas Taylor, is now moonlighting as an eco-warrior. The icy depths below, teeming with prehistoric nightmares, including the fearsome Megalodon and an array of other prehistoric monsters, is still a horror threatening to upend the natural order. And when Jonas, his brother-in-law Zhu Ming, his young stepdaughter Mei-Ying, and the crew discover that someone else has infiltrated the trench, things take a wild turn. Fighting undersea avalanches, megalodons, giant squids, and other prehistoric creatures, Jonas and the team race against the clock to not only survive, but also put a stop to the ancient creatures about to threaten the shores. So far so MEG, but the trench veers adrift in open waters. Considering we had the same writing team, you'd think the sequel would incorporate all that worked in the first film while fixing what didn't.
Right? Wrong.
While we do get 3 MEGs in the sequel, in addition to a few more creatures, the trench is a writing fail that struggles to grasp and execute the fundamentals of storytelling. The writers nonchalantly kill characters off screen, add new ones and expect you to care about them without putting in the necessary work. They've removed all the important personal drama and dynamics established in the first film, inserted more cliches and tropes, while giving the main characters plot armor and new skills that come out of nowhere to serve the plot. We have the addition of unnecessary subplots that lead nowhere. They've injected weird tonal shifts, written it so both our heroes and villains do stupid things to facilitate the plot, added coincidences and contrivances that leave you scratching your head, filled it with poor character work, predictable twists and revelations. In addition to focusing on generic human villains for 80% of the runtime, instead of the MEGs we want to see until the very end. To me, not only is the MEG a bait and switch, but it feels like outright sabotage.
What is this?
Realizing they'd left out about 95% of the novel in the first film, writers John Hober, Eric Hober, and Dean Georgeris opened the MEG 2 with the prehistoric prologue from the first book. Giving us a glimpse into the Cretaceous period 65 million years ago, we see the food chain in action. We bear witness to a flying bug eating a smaller insect, before itself being consumed by a reptile that is eaten by a Kronosaurus and its pals, who are tearing into the corpse of another dead dinosaur. Initially chased into the ocean by a hungry T-Rex, they're scared back into the beach and mouth of the apex predator, who is then consumed by a giant Megalodon. Unfortunately, Meg 2, which is about as much based on Steve Alton's The Trench as The Omen is about the Bible, seems to have misplaced its priorities. For some reason, we then find Jonas Taylor moonlighting as an eco-warrior, whilst also lending a hand to Manor 1 and their deep-sea expeditions into the Mariana Trench. This is weird to me because when we first met him, he was just a captain of a rickety ship without much care in the world. No part of him defeating the Meg indicated he was an eco-warrior now. None of it makes any sense. In a confusing opening sequence, where the riders demonstrate how much they loved Hobson Shaw, Jonas does a workout inside a shipping container before using explosives to blow his way out. He's effectively pissed off that the vessel he snuck onto is dumping chemical waste into the ocean, leading to him snapping photos of the deed while avoiding detection. But when he sneaks into the captain's office to take images of incriminating documents, the captain's parrot yells for help. Hearing the commotion, one of the sailors enters and is knocked out by Taylor, who's forced to fight his way out. This is when the film starts to veer into utter lunacy, with Jonas, the paleobiologist, beating the crap out of multiple men that surround him. Sure, Jonas does some daring stunts in the first film, but they're all related to his expertise as a diver, submersible pilot, and paleobiologist. At no time did he turn into Captain America. Regardless, after beating the shit out of almost a dozen men without breaking a sweat, finally surrounded by the captain and his men, Jonas tells them that they're under arrest for illegal dumping of radioactive material. I'm sure they would all just get a fine, but Aquaman here, who has no official status, actually believes the ocean is his jurisdiction. I don't know, I guess defeating a Meg will inflate your ego. Cornered onto the edge of the ship, when the men are about to kill him, Jonas gives him the finger and dives into the water, just as his friend Mac and co-pilot Riggers fly by. You see, their crazy plan is to open a small compartment at the front of the plane and scoop him in the water up like a pelican while traveling at immense speed.
Come on, don't bullshit me.
Physics and logic goes out the window, and we only see the compartment open and not Jonas entering. Of course, this is because the riders know this stunt would actually kill him, and showing this would reveal that. Considering the plane was seaworthy, and the men on the ship didn't have guns, they could have just landed and have him swim over. As we arrive at the Oceanic Institute in Henan, China, we realize that Jonas, Mac, and Riggers are actually employees of Minwei Zhang's son Zhu Ming, now the director of the institute. Marrying his father's marine research with his tech company at the forefront of deep-sea adventures, Zhu Ming has completed the family dream of creating a small lagoon to house and study creatures of the deep. We're told the Manor 1 team have basically been fostering a Meg they lovingly named Heike, which Zhu Ming is convinced is beginning to take to training, despite Jonas telling him the predators will not bend the knee. The engineer has also constructed an exosuit that would enable them to withstand the immense pressure of the trench. It's basically the exosuit from Batman v Superman, enabling its user to punch through heavy concrete pillars and crush metal. Following a demonstration of his tech, Zhu Ming is reminded by his niece that he needs to get ready for a party. It's not until we get to the 10th anniversary of the Institute that night that we discover the writers had unceremoniously killed off Zhu Ming's sister, Mei Ying's mother, and Jonas's romantic interest Su Yin. This effectively has turned Jonas into an overprotective parent to her now teenage daughter Mei Ying. A chip off the old block, the girl is itching to join the action at Manor 1 and explore the abyss. Now, I need to clarify that we're never told what happened to Su Yin, she's never brought up again, and while it's implied that Jonas was now Mei Ying's stepfather, the writers never actually confirmed this. She never calls him father, nor does he call her daughter, or acknowledge whether Jonas and Su Yin got married in the time after the first film and before her mysterious death. It should also be noted that Zhu Ming, who has effectively replaced her, was never mentioned in the previous film. He apparated just as suddenly as someone cast a vanishing spell on his sister. No explanation is given to how the young female Meg was captured either. This is indicative of writers that want to tell a story but have no idea how to get there. More on that shortly. But for the story to make sense as it's revealed to us, we'll go with the notion that Jonas is indeed Mei Ying's stepfather. What we do know for sure is that the expensive ventures to the trench for marine research, which is only superficially mentioned but never dived into or explained, is now being bankrolled by Hilary Driscoll, owner of Explantitum Technologies and Manor 1's billionaire investor. Now, I don't know why, but Hilary looks like she's out of her mind.
Thank you for coming tonight and for joining me in funding this incredible work.
And I was immediately suspecting that something was up. As Hillary introduces Zhu Ming to the stage, Taylor points to a guy he doesn't like the look of, before Mac does an exposition dump on how many times he keeps bailing Taylor out of danger. The director then unveils Heike, the Meg they've been raising and studying over the years, before thanking everyone that enabled him to create the submersibles that could penetrate the thermocline and venture over 6.5 kilometers further into the trench. Zhu Ming says that their aim is to protect the ocean, a subplot his father had in the novels, but you never believe that's his goal. Instead, the character comes off as an adventurous thrill-seeker, wanting to push himself to the limit. As the director posited, there were many other creatures they were yet to see. Mac jokingly beckons the crowd to meet Jonas, the man that fought a Megalodon and lived, much to his annoyance. At the same time that Zhu Ming insanely prepares to dive into the lagoon and greet Heike, his niece and brother-in-law have a heart-to-heart. The girl essentially wants to join one of the Manor 1 submersibles in their next dive to investigate the trench, but citing she was only 14 years old, Jonas forbids her from coming. Responding by telling him he needs to start taking her seriously, she notes how familiar she now was with all of Manor 1's tech and programs. At the same time, the writers contradict this by having her make a lot of stupid decisions, designed just to put her in peril and raise the stakes for Jonas in the most contrived of ways. It's here we also learn that Zhu Ming has been running an experiment, using a single pulse to lure the Meg towards him and 2 pulses to repel it, much to Jonas's frustration, who's adamant it can't be trained. While it's implied he does this all the time, not just by his eagerness to get into the water, but by the very fact that the Meg begins responding to his commands, everyone inside the research base appears to be surprised to see the Meg obey him. Staring directly at him and the team behind the glass, the creature swims past and also catches a sneaky look at the barred gate keeping her in. But when she comes back for the second approach, she actually snaps at the director, forcing him to float up moments before he gets eaten. Initially trying to convince everybody the experiment went well, he eventually concedes that she was acting strange or weak, reasoning this must have been why she attacked him. However, Jonas doesn't hold back from letting him know how reckless he was being, and how he'd terrified his niece. Pushing back, Zhu Ming notes Taylor was also behaving just as recklessly, completing solo espionage missions to stop pollution, a subplot that is never explained, rationalized, or brought up again. Still, while unable to break much common ground and not sure what was actually wrong with the Meg, they agree that they've both been taking massive risks. Humanizing Heike in the same way that Jurassic World tried to humanize the raptors, we see Mei Ying asking the young female Meg if she also missed her mother. Now, there's a wee problem here, and that's how everyone is just taking the existence of these magnificent prehistoric monstrosities, the Megalodons, for granted. There's no fear, no awe, just acceptance. The flick tries to tug at the heartstrings with young Mei Ying bonding with the beast, not realizing we're supposed to be bloody scared of the damn thing. Unbeknownst to everyone, Heike was actually frustrated because she was ovulating and trying to look for a mate, explaining her more than usual aggressiveness. But there's also more trouble on the horizon. I mean, this lagoon is barely big enough for one shark, let alone a Meg, whose territory used to be, the entire ocean, so keeping it here is a bold strategy. They have these subs that have done over 26 dives to the trench already to study the sharks, and this seems like a catastrophic risk, but let's see how it plays out. As the team leave the lagoon housing the Meg and begin to arrive at the massive Manor 1 research center in the ocean, having already scouted an escape route, we see Heike break through a giant vent and swim away. Clever girl. The team then begin making their descent, with Jonas, Rigus, and Sal in one sub, while Zhu Ming, Curtis, and Lance piloted the other. We're told they're at 17,000 feet, but unlike the first film, where these depths were dark and claustrophobic, you wouldn't know it with how bright everything is outside their sub. I know they have lights, but it's weird that the exterior of the submersibles, which is deep into the ocean, often looks similar to the exterior of the Manor 1 base, which is, being lit by the sun. Monitoring them is DJ and Mac from the first film, and Jess, along with the rest of their research staff, who note the oxygen levels in the first sub was off. It's not until the hatch swings open that they realize Mei Ying had snuck aboard. Like a responsible parent, Jonas tells them to stop and orders his team to head back, only for the girl to respond by saying that, although she knew he was angry, she believed this was a reasonable and responsible decision. You'd think that since this is one of their many runs and time isn't an issue, they would simply resurface out of respect for her mother and grandfather if anything else. But their security officer Rigus, a character we know nothing about, tells him that she did all types of stupid stuff when she was a kid, before asking him to look at how she turned out. This means absolutely nothing because we don't know who she is, and more importantly, it doesn't address the issue of Mei Ying being in danger. Yet everyone on both subs, including her own uncle, smile and jokingly insist that it's not much of a big deal, citing how she'd already packed her own dive gear. This is what I mean by characters behaving uncharacteristically to facilitate plot. They're like puppets saying and doing irrational things because their writers need them to reach the next plot point. Telling them that they're surfacing and grilling her uncle by saying it's not his call, which I guess implies that Jonas is the stepfather. He's notified that a MEG was approaching their position. Confused as to how one was able to pass the inhospitable cold of the thermocline, they quickly realize it was Heike on their tail, forcing them to rapidly dive at full speed to avoid her. Of course, this makes me wonder how they got Heike into the lagoon in the first place, but I digress to preserve my own sanity. Passing through the barrier, they're met by an inexplicable sight of multiple giant MEGs, once believed to be solitary, swimming together beside them. With the creatures not attacking them, but instead migrating to a location, her uncle proposes they change the mission profile and follow the MEGs instead. Here I think it's important to note they mention that by switching from white to red lights, the MEGs can't notice them, which is why they don't attack them. But remember, the MEGs can detect electrical fields produced by the movement and heartbeats of animals hundreds, if not thousands, of kilometers away, which means switching the lights does absolutely nothing. It's just utter insanity.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
While Curtis does point out they're heading into uncharted territory, only DJ kicks up a fuss about how crazy their actions were. Even more peculiar is the sight of a giant structure, initially thought to be a wreck, but revealed to be a base. Of course, with the astronomical cost that would be needed for such a venture, and surprised that someone had already set up operations, the confused team go in to investigate. Enter Evil Mining Company that's been pulling out rare earth materials from the trench, right under the nose of Manor 1. Not only that, but they appear to be using Zhu Ming's newly developed exosuits to walk on the trench, enabling them to set up explosive charges by hand. Noticing Jonas and the others approach, their team leader Montez, and comical bad guy with a mustache whom Jonas was staring down at the party, does what evil guys do, sacrifice his men by prematurely setting off their charges, hoping this would also kill the Manor 1 team. Turns out the mercenary has a score to settle with Jonas, who we're told put him away for environmental crimes, another critical piece of information that comes out of nowhere in exposition. The only problem is that this is pretty much tantamount to setting off C4 to kill a guy in a car while you're sitting beside him, as highlighted by how the explosion he caused knocks his submarine out of commission. While this kills the miners, luckily with some clever maneuvering, the two subs ride out the epic underwater avalanche before their damaged submersibles are buried in rocks. The explosion also creates a large hole in the thermocline that would eventually allow the prehistoric monsters to reach the surface. Getting ready for a rescue mission, Mac tells Jess, another new character and their lead technician on Manor 1, to prep the third submersible. At the same time, we cut to Mei Ying freaking out to Jonas about her uncle, who they've lost contact with. As if things couldn't get any worse, Jess immediately calls Mac to inform him the rescue sub was sabotaged, and the plot thickens with boring B-plot source. Explaining there were at least 30 other people working on the base that could have damaged it, she then notes that there was no way to fix it or figure out who the mole was. A very moly thing to utter, you might say. Without heat to keep them warm and concerned that they were losing oxygen quickly, Jonas orders his team to put on their exosuits and get ready to walk to the massive underwater base they found earlier. While the suits increased their strength and durability, and they had underwater guns for some reason, the appearance of hungry chronosaurs and a MEG attracted to the ensuing carnage make their life hell. After locating Zhu Min and the other team, who were also protected by plot armor, Statham leads them across the trench, evoking fleeting sparks of the undersea beauty. But what could have been a tense survival story turns into a hard-to-follow action sequence, interspersed with mind-numbing small talk. Honestly, the stakes are like an off and on switch for the riders. The sequence unfurls in the murky depths of the ocean floor, and the colors are deeply saturated, making it difficult to see what is happening. The choppy editing doesn't help much either. Their exosuits, which enable them to punch the marine life attacking them while running in a comical display, also rob the scenes of its potency. You never feel like they're in any danger, unlike the first film, where a single MEG was very effective in creating a never-ending sense of dread. Firing a number of shots into the fast and agile dinosaurs as they ran towards safety, they start dropping like flies, leaving only Taylor, Mei Ying, Zhu Ming and Riggis when Sal's helmet caves in due to decompression. A moment borrowed directly from Underwater, a much better film. Cutting to the damaged submarine of Montez, we learn that his employer was actually Hillary all along, and the billionaire investor of Manor One isn't too happy that they survived the explosion. Finally reaching the station to learn it was indeed part of a secret mining operation taking rare earth minerals, the team is shocked to learn that Jess was the mole that betrayed them. I say realized, but there's no discovery. She tells them just as much after leading them to the escape pods by radio and locking them in. This moment never comes as a surprise, as the only other people with more than one line are Jess, DJ, and Mac on Manor One. Considering DJ and Mac were close friends with Jonas in the previous film, and Jess as a new character acting all aloof, it was a bit of a no-brainer. I was half expecting the writers to do something clever like have DJ and Mac trick Jess into revealing she was a mole by feeding her maybe faulty information, but that doesn't happen either. Instead, in a hilarious scene, the pair go over footage of Jess fixing the third sub and see a comically over-the-top spark go off. There's no subtlety, craft, or anything captivating about this critical revelation. They don't refine the footage to discover that Jess was sabotaging the sub while pretending to be setting it up, something you'd find in better films. They just had to watch the security footage. It's like this whole story is written by children. Under orders from Hillary, Jess offers to let them go if they joined her. But despite not holding any cards to play and needing to save his daughter, Jonas does the opposite of what a smart character would. Instead of just agreeing so they live to fight another day, he blames her for all the deaths, causing Jess to launch one of the remaining escape pods. She then bitterly orders Riggers to shoot him, saying that doing so would guarantee the others a spot on the remaining escape pods. When Riggers refuses, Hillary herself then makes an appearance on screen to chastise Jonas and his brother-in-law, thanking them for their research and technology before giving the go-ahead for Jess to flood their compartment. What the evil women didn't anticipate was that the insane underwater Giga Chat could effectively force air into his sinus cavities and hold out for at least 30 seconds, giving him enough time to swim through the airlock.
Water doesn't compress under pressure, so if he can force water in his sinus cavities, he could survive 30, maybe 60 seconds before he passes out.
Unsurprisingly, after being encouraged by Ju Ming that he's the only one capable of doing this, he manages to make the painful swim over, kill a Kronosaurus, and enter the airlock before drowning. Saved by Montez, who drags him to safety, the villain reminds Taylor that he'd put him in prison. Naturally, like us, our hero doesn't know who Montez is, primarily because he was just invented by the writers. Still, despite hating him, and his primary objective being to kill the Manor One team, Montez does the cliched, I'm gonna give a speech while I have the upper hand instead of killing you, thus enabling you to beat me with your second win, because my writers have no creativity. No joke, but all the villains are effectively defeated by their own stupidity, as we're about to find out later in the film. Here at the halfway mark, instead of the Megs we were promised, we get a badly choreographed fight on a conveyor belt between Jonas and a villain he doesn't remember. Ultimately knocking him out, Taylor then runs over to the flooding compartment to save the others. After creating a distraction on the underwater base by turning on the lights, which triggers the Megs into attacking it, Ju Ming and the others rise in a mining submarine. To their surprise, they find it filled with billions of dollars worth of mined rare earth materials. At the same time, the movie's B-plot of mercenaries taking over Manor One is in full swing, with literally everyone other than Mac and DJ turning out to have been evil all along. We could have had some tension, with the mercenaries perhaps capturing hostages and threatening to kill them if Mac and DJ didn't surrender. Instead, we're treated to a farce. Surrounded by Jess and her armed men telling them to open the door, the pair foil them by using pepper spray and one electric taser. And despite Jess being responsible for killing many of their friends, DJ apologizes when he tases Jess. They have a large enough military force to perform a coup, but we never feel as though Mac and DJ are ever in any real danger, because the bad guys are unbelievably dense. As they run around the base protected by plot armor from the stupidest villains imaginable, the movie tries to then convince us that DJ is now Batman.
I trained up, I learned how to fight, I learned how to swim, and I'll never go anywhere without my survival pack.
Telling Mac he wanted to be prepared after what happened in the first film. Not only is his pack filled with gadgets, tools, and a massive gun with poison bullets that could kill a Meg, but he's also a kung fu master like Jonas that takes out 3 men.
It's all bullshit! All of it!
I like that DJ's learnt something from his experience in the first film, but there's a more organic way of weaving this in, rather than DJ somehow having something in the pack that gets him out of each scenario. We then get a shot of Montez resurfacing, somehow surviving his own stupidity, despite being unconscious in the underwater base when the Megs tore it apart.
Bullshit!
While Mac and DJ do get caught, with Ju Ming creating a distraction, Jonas is able to help them defeat their captors. Heading to the control room, Montez arrives and passionately kisses Jess, implying they were a couple all along. The Manor 1 base is reportedly filled with over 40 henchmen, but we only ever see the same 6 or 7 people in frame. The movie's telling us our heroes are surrounded by armed men trying to kill them, but the next shot is of Rigus and Mei Ying just casually loading up supplies on the dock.
You are stupid.
The circumstances imply they're in danger, but as I said, due to the blocking, editing, and poor writing, that just never comes across. With the pair noticing that the 3 Megs they saw earlier had reached the surface, we then cut to Jess and Montez on the phone to Hillary. When their boss spots a Meg swimming past the control room, our geniuses assure her that the glass was Meg-proof moments before it breaks through and swallows her whole, flooding the base in the process. And despite standing right next to her when this happens, we get a ridiculous scene where Montez, once again, outruns the flooding and survives. We're told he's motivated by revenge, but then Hillary offers him unlimited money to kill the Manor 1 team, which was already his job. She also then mocks our villain for crying.
Are you crying, Montez?
The tone is just all over the place. I'm not quite sure whether we're supposed to laugh or fear him, or both, but what I am sure of is that the writers don't know either. We can't fear him because he's underdeveloped and very stupid, just like Hillary, and I'm not sure the point of laughing at his loss. I get it highlights that Hillary is more callous than he, but this doesn't lead anywhere. He doesn't change his mind about Jonas and decide to help them and turn on Hillary, which is what this moment should have been setting up. The point I'm making is that it didn't need to be here as it doesn't serve the story, much like over 75% of what happens in this movie. Making a beeline for the nearest stretch of land, a populated resort known as Fun Island, the Manor 1 team are chased by a small group of mercenaries that open fire on them. Not a single bullet hits their boat, nor does anyone get shot, which is weird for a film where the bad guys are emptying entire clips at our heroes. It's like a combination of Stormtrooper aim and Mandalorian plot armor combined. Luckily, despite a Meg then circling the Manor 1 boat, choosing to eat the mercenaries instead, it switches targets and swallows them whole. Approaching the shore, we're told their aim is to hijack communications on the island, to let the world know what the generic bad guys were doing. Everybody on the island has a phone they could borrow, but hey, let's add a nonsensical contrivance to separate the gang. At the same time, Jonas fashions 3 explosive spears. Here the performances grow increasingly phoned in, and the quality of the special effects dwindle, a stark contrast to Wheatley's past work that was more grounded in practical effects, realism, and complex characters. Unfortunately for everyone in the water, in probably the most creative shot of the film, we get an inside-the-mouth perspective of a Meg scooping up multiple people with each bite. A massive giant octopus also begins to terrorize the beach, just as Jonas and co arrive. Despite being in a safe, undisclosed city, Hillary decides to catch a helicopter to Fun Island for no other reason than to die. Seriously, the writers have her arrive to tell Montez the same thing she was telling him over the phone throughout the film. Not only that, but when the prehistoric nightmares start feeding on her men, she jumps back into the helicopter before stupidly ordering her pilot to get out and investigate a sound. Of course, it's here, in the most stupidest of ways, that she gets her comeuppance, getting consumed by a Kronosaurus. She isn't defeated by our heroes. They don't even know she's here, nor does she get undone by avarice or greed. It's her own stupidity that gets her. Here Jonas tells Rigus and DJ to find a way to call for aid, while he and the boys took care of the Megs. In the midst of this, I kid you not, he tells his daughter to wait in an exposed tower right next to the beach as 3 giant Megs and a giant octopus begin eating everyone on the shore. The writers want his daughter to be in danger, forcing him to both deal with the creatures and figure out a way to save her, but this getting the hero, a Meg expert, to tell her to effectively stand by the water is utter lunacy. He even says the words, "I can't do what I need to do if I'm worried about you," before urging that if there ever were a time she needed to listen to him, it was now. He could have easily told her to go with DJ and Rigus, or get Mac or his brother-in-law to stay with her, but we need artificial stakes, so here we are. What makes the choice to add the villain B-plot instead of focusing on the Megs ultimately so baffling is that Hillary and her mercenaries don't have an impact on the plot. She, along with her men, are killed by snappers further inland, while our heroes dealt with the Megs and octopus. It's like they mashed 2 unrelated stories into one convoluted mess and didn't know how to wrap it up. Naturally, as Jonas displays his bravery and aquatic prowess, using the explosive spears to hunt the Megs, Montez, who I should remind you will no longer be getting paid as Hillary was dead, and had just lost his partner Jess, all things that have literally nothing to do with Jonas, decides to jump on a boat and chase him down with a machine gun. It's like every opportunity they had to do something good with the characters or story, the writers simply opted for the worst choice. Just as I was about to check out, Rigus steals money from a dead man's wallet before running away, effectively leaving DJ to fend for himself as a Kronosaurus approached him. Well, it turns out she grew up into an awful person after all. This is what I mean. When given the chance, they continually assassinate the integrity, logic, motivations, and objectives of the characters for no reason. Running into the shelter of a cabin, the pair are surprised to find Mac and Zhu-Ming detained by armed mercenaries with guns pointed at them. Noticing the button to the garage door was behind DJ, Zhu-Ming causes him to fall back onto it, letting the hungry snappers waiting outside feast on the bad guys. The same time that Top Ski blows the head of one of the Megs off, Mac and Zhu-Ming take Hillary's helicopter and load it up with explosives to help him in a ridiculously plotted sequence. It wouldn't be Meg 2 without a main character making a stupid choice, so in comes Mei Ying, who spots a lone person struggling in the water and decides that she's the best person to save them, not the hundreds of adults around her. What's crazy is that in the shot, we see the person is about 15 to 20 meters away from their friends and family on the jetty, yet Mei Ying, who is over 200 meters away, makes a stupid choice to put herself in harm's way. It's like everyone in this movie is allergic to good decision making and has no self-preservation receptors in the brain. Managing to somehow rescue them, the girl realizes she was now surrounded by a massive squid. The giant monster brings the chopper down and even grabs the girl with its tentacles, but not before Zhu-Ming is able to stab it with their explosive, freeing his niece. The second Meg chases Jonas, miffed that he killed its mate, and is about to kill him when Montez, again, stupidly leaves the relative safety of his vehicle to kill Jonas before the Meg did. Once again, the using C4 to blow up a person while you're sitting next to them analogy comes to mind. Unfortunately for him, Jonas simply kicks him into the mouth of the hungry Meg, which swallows him whole. And although the massive squid pulls him into the water, Zhu-Ming is saved by the Meg, which eats the tentacled monster. With Zhu-Ming struggling to pull Mac out of the damaged helicopter and a Meg approaching them, Jonas straight up grabs one of the helicopter blades and lures it towards him by splashing the water. Using his big balls, the momentum of the Meg, and by bracing the blade on the rocks, he effectively stabs it through the brain. With the last Meg revealed to be Heike approaching the trio and then swimming away when Zhu-Ming triggers the pulse, he credits this to her remembering him. However, Jonas tells him it's more likely that she was chasing the dolphins in front of her. As Zhu-Ming then ponders if Heike was now pregnant, Taylor decides to crack a beer open, right after telling his daughter he was proud of her for ignoring every piece of advice and order he gave her throughout the film. The movie then ends with the gang just chilling on the beach, like there wasn't a massive hole in the thermocline as a result of their actions, enabling dinosaurs to rise, in addition to hundreds of creatures on the island still eating people, and their Meg in open waters.
This is a bad idea. Just a little bit.
Again.
It's not gonna work.
For a supposed eco-warrior and paleobiologist, my man seems way too chill considering they're responsible for the entire ecosystem of the ocean now being at risk. Wheatley's directorial finesse is barely noticeable, and I feel there might have been some major studio interference in this film. The plot is unbearable for the first 2 acts, while dialogue is all function with no flair, peppered with pitiful wisecracks, characters behaving uncharacteristically, and line after line of painfully dull exposition. The first movie struck a delightful balance between monster mayhem and campy self-parody, and it felt like everyone was in on the joke. But telling the same joke twice with half the effort and a quarter of the technical skill is exactly why the Meg 2 plummets to the very depths of the Mariana Trench itself. The action sequences are a flurry of hasty edits. The CGI creatures, especially the snappers, look bad. The villains are boring, nonsensical, and so incompetent that you could scarcely believe they were able to infiltrate Manor 1 in the first place. And worst of all, Hillary and Montez don't affect or change the characters in any meaningful way, as they barely interact with them beyond threats on a screen. The final 10 minutes attempt to resuscitate the film, but it's too little too late. I couldn't help but feel that instead of writing a sequel to the first film, they tried to repackage Aliens, Jurassic Park, Underwater, and Deep Blue Sea with little effort. Jason Statham scolds his way through the movie and seems to be on autopilot. His character, once a diver looking for redemption and purpose, is a husk of his former self. Mei Ying is unbearable. DJ is a caricature of a person. Cliff Curtis is a token friend of the hero and severely underutilizes Mac, while Wu Jing's Zhu-Ming is basically Jonas with a sense of humor. All of them fall victim to poor writing, lacking the depth, intelligence, and charm of their own characters in the previous film. Montez, Jess, and Hillary are useless villains written with little thought not only in their characterization, but their role structurally in the narrative. Rewatching the film, many of the scenes make even less sense, like our introduction to Montez at the Institute. Why would Hillary invite her head of security, someone that Jonas knew, to the party, putting her multi-billion-dollar mining operation at risk? The opening montage could have instead shown us how he apprehended Montez, giving the film connective tissue that was sorely missing. None of the characters have an arc or learn any valuable lessons either. nor is there a theme or message. We still don't know what happened to Su-Yin by the end, nor Taylor's ex-wife Laurie, who was a critical member of Manor One in the previous film, nor do we get a confirmation as to whether Zhu Ming was right about Haiki obeying his commands. Everything is just left deliberately vague. Even Haiki is done dirty. She's in so little of the film, and by implying she was trainable, they effectively took the teeth out of her bite. Abandoning the fundamentals of storytelling and reason, the Meg 2 is a messy and incomprehensible attempt to recapture lightning in a bottle.
No sequel for you.
With that said, that's all for today, folks. A huge thanks to everyone that requested we explore the trench. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and if there's anything else you'd like for me to cover, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.
Everybody make it to the station! You can make it! Inside!
See you later, chum.